What's going on, guys? Pete Nova here with the Faceoff Sports Network. I'm back today to go over a first round post NFL free agency 32 team mock draft. So I got my partner in crime here, Michael Hoff, the FF Realist on X. That's where you can find him. Myself, I am Supernova 38 with 2 R's. Hoff, you ready to do this thing, man?
Yes, sir. Yeah, let's dig into this draft.
All right, let's just jump straight into it. So, pretty much, me and Hoff will go back and forth between who our selections are. Given that Hoff is the 49ers fan, I will let him pick first, so that way he gets to make their selection. And conveniently for me, I will also be able to get the Broncos at the even numbers. But Hoff, you got the number one pick here for the Titans. What are you thinking?
As much as I would like to go with Abdul Carter, I gotta lean quarterback here. Clearly, that was a void there. Will Levis clearly is not cutting it, so I'm gonna go with Cam Ward. He's my favorite quarterback in this draft, and I think he's the quarterback that the Titans want the most. I think the Giants. I do believe the Giants are going to try and trade up here. I do think they'll make some phone calls, but I don't think the Titans will actually entertain it. So I'm going to go Cam Ward.
Yeah, I mean, I think Cam Ward makes a lot of sense. I know a lot of back and forth of, will they trade off the pick? Will they not? I'm kind of in agreement with you with Cam Ward. I mean, I think he's clear and above better than the rest of the quarterbacks in this class. 13 games last year, 12 games, 13 games. He's stayed healthy through his college career. Was a down year in terms of completion percentage. Actually, I'm sorry, an up year in terms of completion percentage. I'm reading 2022 stats. But I mean, threw for 600 more yards than he did in 2023. I mean, he's progressed every single year. His yards per attempt have gone up every year. And obviously, I mean, he threw the 39 touchdowns and he almost, doubled his touchdowns while throwing the same amount of interceptions at 7. He went 39 for 7 last year. And yeah, I think it makes a ton of sense. I think Titans probably won't flirt around. And look, I think at the end of the day, you don't know the next time you're going to have the number one overall pick, right? And when you don't have a quarterback, who's to say if you're bad next year, you're going to be able to trade up to, get the best quarterback, right? So I'm fine with that. I think here at number 2, Cleveland's interesting. I don't think Cleveland goes quarterback. At this point in time, they're hosting Russell Wilson. I think Kirk Cousins is kind of waiting in the wings right now to be cut
Apparently
or
he's going to be
traded.
back in Atlanta.
Yeah, I think it's really just they're trying to wait and figure out where Rodgers goes, and then he'll have a chance to either pick the Giants, the Steelers, or the Browns. And if not any of those teams, he'll decide to stay and be a backup. But Browns here at 2, a lot of needs on the board. I mean, Nick Chubb's getting old, right? Wide receivers in need as well. They have Jerry Jeudy, but not really much around him. Elijah Moore's a free agent. Tackle, corner. I think for me, I got to think that they go Travis Hunter or Abdul Carter here. They did just lock up Myles Garrett, so I'm going to go Travis Hunter here. There's a possibility he plays wide receiver a little bit for them as well. And cornerback is a need for them. And bringing back Myles Garrett, if they didn't, and then I would have went Abdul Carter there. But I think Travis Hunter is likely the best guy there at number 2 for them.
Yeah, no, I don't hate that call at all. Yeah, I think Travis Hunter goes. The thing what makes this the most interesting to me is what the Browns do and what that means the Giants will have to do, which is our third pick in this draft. Because I've been saying a lot that they should trade for Joe Milton, that being the Giants, and then go ahead and try and draft Travis Hunter or draft another. Or at that point, you could draft Abdul Carter if he's there. But
Sure.
if they don't get Aaron Rodgers, which I'm gonna go on the idea that they're not gonna get him, that's only gonna force their hand more to take a quarterback here. And the thing that bothers me here, and I'm curious for your thoughts here,
Sure.
is we've heard a lot more and more as this draft season's rolled on that Shedeur Sanders is going to slip. Right?
Mm-hmm.
How far does he slip? at that point, do the Giants want to take him here at 3? I mean, obviously, quarterback is a position of need, offensive tackle, defensive tackle. They've got a lot of areas in which they could improve here, but I'm ultimately going to go with them taking a quarterback here, and I am going to go Shedeur Sanders. I just think this is typical New York Giants. It's not playing out the way they wanted to. They wish they could have lost that game that they won. Remember that game with Drew Lock when Drew Lock went absolutely bananas, and
Yep.
it
Oh,
basically
I
shot
remember it
their
well.
draft stock. So I think this is going to be Shedeur Sanders. Um, I should, could you say it's Abdul Carter? Yeah, you could, I suppose, but I think there's a real need here for them to just get a quarterback in the building. We have to remember these Giants front office people are fighting for their jobs at this point. I know there's a lot of question marks with Shedeur Sanders, um, more so than Cam Ward, but yeah, I'll go Shedeur Sanders here.
Yeah, I mean, I would say I definitely agree with you. I think most likely pick is Shedeur Sanders for the Giants at this point. He's been linked to them. It seems like the team likes him from all the reports, and I think I'm not necessarily in love with Shedeur Sanders, but to me, I just think that if there was a, you know, there there are times where I initially thought like, hey, big market, a lot of distractions, he's into fashion, he's into a lot of different things. Is that a
Sure.
concern?
The whole
But
element of his dad. Yeah.
right, but I also think at the same time, like guys like him, like they thrive in also like would thrive in a big market, right? Like they feed off of the media and that environment. And so I actually think it could be a positive for Sanders. I think you look at some of these places and guys go to I don't know, like Kansas City, for example, where there's not a ton going on, right?
Sure.
And you could use that as a way to say, well, they'll lock in and they have, XYZ. But I just feel like I don't think he would be happy. And I think his mental state would probably be better in New York. And I think he could handle the media there. So I think Shedeur is a good fit there. I'm not in love with the quarterback at all. I'm not a huge
No.
fan of him in terms of his skill set. I don't really care about this Dion stuff and the other reasons as to why some might not love
No.
him, but I think he would be a good fit. The thing I worry about with the Giants, and when you look at what the Giants have done in free agency, right? They have brought in a lot of guys on the defense, not a ton of signings on the offense, right? And they bring back Slayton, they bring back DeVito, Chris Manhertz, who's a blocking tight end. They don't really bring in a ton of talent now. They brought in a nice corner over from the Saints, Paulson Adebo, Javon Holland. The secondary looks good, right? They're making a decent amount of moves on the defensive side of the ball.
Oh yeah.
They brought in 2 linemen, but I think at the end of the day, this is going to be a draft where they're going to take Sanders, and I think they're probably going to attack the offensive side of the football, especially in the trenches. But moving on to the Patriots, this is a pick here that people have a lot of mixed opinions, right? This is an offensive line that was one of the worst in the NFL last year. And people believe that they should build in the trenches. And I'd like to hear your opinion here, but I'm going to go with Tet McMillan. And I think part of the frustration that I have about the discourse around Tet McMillan is, people, we do this every year where guys that, are definitely seen as the number one player coming into the draft after a month or two in the offseason, guys get fatigued, right? Prospect fatigued, hearing about the same guy. And so they look at other guys and try to poke holes into the guy that's seen as the number one. And then for some reason, narratives start to be created. But I mean, this guy is very much like Drake London, in my opinion. Good contested catch rate. His yards per route run are very high. The only difference between him and Drake London is, London had better competition in college where Tet didn't really have to compete for the football. There wasn't a ton of talent around him, but I like Tet McMillan here. And then the only other thing I was going to say is and then I want to hear your thought about this, is New England has swung and missed on so many free agents, trade targets at the wide receiver position, draft, guys they've drafted. I mean, they drafted Baker last year, they drafted Jalen Polk. Like those guys barely saw the field last year.
Yeah.
And I mean, to me, even if Tet wasn't the number, they need to take the number one wide receiver on their board for me and help Drake May out, and then focus on the trenches. Like people will say they need to go trenches early, and I think they will address that. They brought in Morgan Moses, like they attacked it on the defensive side of the football in free agency. Like I just think, to me, if Tet's not their number one wide receiver, then they should trade back and then draft. If Tet's not the number one wide receiver, likely no other receivers going top 10. So then trade off the pick, move back, and then take your favorite wide receiver. But like, let's not flirt with trying to, draft a wide receiver round 2. Like it just hasn't worked out for them. And to me, like, just go get the best guy on the board. So that's kind of my thoughts on it. I mean, I don't know where you lie on that. I mean, but that's kind of how I feel about Tet McMillan.
I don't hate that pick at all. I don't mind Tet McMillan, especially because, what did we hear all off season? We heard, oh, the Patriots have a lot of money to spend. The Patriots going to bring in this guy. Patriots going to bring in that guy. There's so many wide receivers they were going to be rumored to bring in.
Right.
So far, they brought in Mac Hans. That's it. So that's not going to do it. And, you talked about, like the wide receivers in the house right now, those guys aren't going to cut it either. If this team wants to turn the corner, if they want to be serious, they're going to need a serious pass catcher. So, I actually agree with this. I'm not going to fight you too much on that. Yeah, I will say Tet McMillan would be a good spot here.
Yeah, I mean, again, I think a lot of people are moving Tet to now not being their number one wide receiver on a lot of people's boards, and I just feel like, people are scared that he didn't test at the combine. It's just finding more and more narratives to poke holes in him being number one. And I don't mind people not having him there, but overall, from a Patriots standpoint, I just feel like this team needs to get this right. And O-line will be addressed. I'm not worried about that, but I just think you need to go
that's the
get
one
him weapons.
that would be the only pushback, if anything, maybe
Yeah.
like a Will Campbell,
Yeah.
Like, is that but I agree. They need to finally, once and for all, get this wide receiver position right. So,
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Well, you're on the clock here with the Jags at number 5. So go for it.
all right. So let me just do this here. So, I mean, we're going into this here. I mean, it almost seems crazy to me that we have Abdul Carter still not picked. But at the same time, I feel like this is going to be a spot in which defensive tackle is going to be. I mean, we know how many defensive tackles they were invited to the combine, a lot more than the year prior. So this is a spot for them to go ahead and hit on D tackle. It is one of their biggest positions of need. So if I'm going to go D tackle here, I mean, I want to say Mason Graham here, but does it seem blasphemous that Mason Graham is going before Abdul Carter?
I mean, not necessarily. I think the biggest thing for the Jags is best player available, likely, right? I mean, they're at a spot where they need to take best player available, and if they have Mason Graham over Abdul Carter, then that's who I think they would make the pick. I mean, I'm fine going with either guys. It's tough to imagine Abdul Carter slipping out of this.
You know what? I'm gonna, I'll go. I'll do this. I'll kind of caveat. I'll kind of go. I'm gonna hedge it a little bit.
Yeah.
I'm gonna say they go Abdul Carter, but I'll say if Abdul Carter goes in the first few picks before the Jaguars pick, then they are going with Mason Graham. So
yeah, I can
that's
get
how
on
I'll kind of. That's kind of how I'll hedge this a little bit. So let's go Abdul Carter there, going over to the Jacksonville Jaguars. Duval, but yeah.
Yeah, I'm cool with that. I don't see there being an issue. I mean, the Raiders here at number 6 are interesting, right? I mean, they come in, they bring Geno Smith in the building. You know, their offseason they trade for Geno, they extend Max Crosby, they bring a couple guys back in house. They bring in Jeremy Chin on a 2-year, $16 million deal. Alex Kappa, on the offensive line. Lonnie Johnson, Eric Stokes, Raheem Mostert on a 1-year, $2.1 million deal. I don't think Raheem Mostert's stopping them from taking Ashton Jeanty. And I think at this point, I needed to see what the Raiders would do in this free agency before I was comfortable saying that they would take Ashton Jeanty. But at this point, with Pete Carroll's draft record, right, with him taking, Rashad Penny high, taking Kenneth Walker high, I just think that Ashton Jeanty makes a lot of sense for them at this point in time. And this is a team that's looking to compete, right? They bring in a veteran. The only reason you bring in Geno Smith is if you think that you want to be competitive, right? Like you're trading for a 34-year-old guy who's looking for an extension on his deal. They haven't reached that extension yet, but he's probably looking for more than Sam Darnold got because that's why Seattle didn't keep him. So
Sure.
he's looking probably for somewhere around 45 to 50 million a year. And if that's the case and you're trading for him, you better believe that you're in win now mode. And I think that's a good reason to take Ashton Jeanty. And what better to fit Ashton Jeanty with than Pete Carroll, who, has always had good running backs in his system. So I'd take Ashton Jeanty there at 6.
Yeah, I like that pick. I mean, this week, they also added Raheem Mostert over there, which just selfishly as a 49ers fan, I'm quite relieved that he didn't go back to the Niners because 49er Twitter probably would have just self-imploded and put up a for sale sign at that point. But no, so there is another running back who is needed there. I think Mostert will help in certain areas, but yeah, no, you're right. These guys got to come out swinging. I think that they will. I believe in Pete Carroll. I saw what he did with the Seahawks, turn that into an absolute powerhouse. So, yeah, no, I like that pick quite a bit.
Cool. All right. Well, you were up with the New York Football Jets here at the 7 spot. What are you doing?
Enough's enough here. He's one of my favorite offensive tackles in this draft. They need offensive linemen. They need somebody to block for Justin Fields. They're also going to be running the ball with Breece Hall quite a bit. I'm going to go Will Campbell here out of LSU. Again, he was one of my favorite offensive linemen in this draft. So I think that's the pick here. Curious for your thoughts if you think that there is another way that the Jets should go here. But to me, they really, it's all about the trenches. They need to build up the offensive line.
Yeah.
And I think they're going to, you look at, Aaron Glenn coming over from Detroit. What did Detroit do in those first few drafts with Dan Campbell?
Right.
They went ahead and they pounded the trenches. They got the trenches done. And now they're on both sides of the ball. It's one of the best in football. So I think this is a Will Campbell spot right here. I'm curious if you have any pushback or if you thought another player would be better in this spot.
No, I mean, I think Will Campbell's fair. When you look, the Jets did lose Morgan Moses. I mean, not like that was a huge loss, right? He's not
Right.
returning. I like Morgan Moses. They're going to have to be able to fill these plugs. Now, they did draft Fashanu, Tyrone Smith, and Morgan Moses. Both of those tackles, though, are no longer with the team. In free agency, they bring in, Chuck Wuma or Okafor. I'm not too familiar with him. Their big signings have been Fields, Brandon Stevens on a 3-year, $36 million deal, Andre Cisco at safety, edge, Rashad Weaver. They bring in Stone Smart from the Chargers, our boy. We liked Stone Smart in fantasy a couple weeks last year. And then Josh Myers, right, on a 1-year deal at center. So I definitely think, tackle makes a lot of sense for them. And I'm cool with it. I think the concern with Will Campbell really is the short arms, right? I know teams like that. That's the biggest concern is he has like very short arms for a tackle, historically short arms, and but I mean he tested really well. He moves really well. The talent's there, and he could always get kicked inside. People will say maybe Tyler Warren for the Jets there. I don't see it because to me, I feel like they would have they passed on Brock Bowers last year. Now it's a different regime. Don't get me wrong. I just don't see them drafting Tyler Warren that high. Is that something that you see as a possibility?
No, I don't see that happening either, in my
Yeah.
opinion.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So here at the 8 spot, this is a team in the Carolina Panthers that need a decent amount of help here. Their biggest needs wide receiver, edge, DB. Look, Jalen Coker was a nice story last year. I think he'll be somebody that'll, be used. They bring back Tommy Tremble, Andy Dalton's back, a couple guys on the, two guys on the O line. In terms of their big signing, we thought they were going to make a big splash. That was mostly on the defense. They bring in Tershawn Wharton, 3 years, 54. Trevon Moehrig at safety, 3 years, 51 million. Patrick Jones, 2 years, 20 at edge. Rico Dowdle, our boy, 1 year, 6.5. Sam Martin, right? So they still have a little bit of work to do, but they did bring in a big piece at D tackle. So I don't know if Mason Graham is the guy here. It's painful to see him possibly slip. But honestly, I get the vibe that like people aren't gonna love this, but I could really see them going after Tyler Warren and just giving him another piece there, if they have him high on their board. Um, yeah,
Me being a Jontavian Sanders guy, I don't approve.
I know. I'm not. Yeah, I'm trying to see.
Hook 'em horns, you know.
Yeah, I know. I'm trying to think. I mean, like Tyler Warren. I know it sounds crazy, but I feel like it would be such a nice piece. Obviously, Jatavian Sanders was, a nice story last year. I don't feel like they're also exclusive to adding Mason Graham. So I'm gonna get weird. I'm gonna go ahead and add Mason Graham here. I think they're also in a situation where it's best player available right now. Sure, could they help out Bryce Young? Yeah, but their O line is really good, so it's not necessarily a matter of helping him there. I think they can get somebody in round 2 that they like. And so yeah, I'll go Mason Graham, who's probably best player available on the board.
Yeah.
And even if they bring in a big D tackle in free agency, it's not earth shattering. And I think that they'd still take Mason Graham if he's there on the board.
Yeah, no, I agree. As much as selfishly I would have liked him to drop to 11 to my 49ers because they've
Yep.
got one of the worst defensive tackle rooms in all of the NFL. Yeah, I think this is one of those spots where it is best player available, and yeah, it is Mason Graham. Again, I mentioned earlier when we talked about this, if Abdul Carter goes between picks 1 and 4, then I think Mason Graham finds a home with the Jaguars at pick 5. So, yeah, this is definitely a best player available spot, and again, falling all the way down there to 8, I think that's a blessing for the Carolina Panthers, and it's only going to help them get better. So
Yeah.
that defense had their problems last year after not being awful the year prior. So
Yeah, it was a strange. It was surprising to see. I thought their defense would be better this year.
all right, let's get on over to the New Orleans Saints. The Saints here, Saints are usually in cap hell, and if I'm pulling up some of their stuff here, I mean, they brought back Chase Young, Justin Reed, Juwan Johnson, so they got a lot of familiar faces coming back. Debo has left, or Dabu, however you want to pronounce it. He went over to the New York Football Giants. So, yeah, there's not a lot going on here. Marquez Valdez scanning left. They brought back Dante Pettis. It's just it's what you'd expect from the New Orleans Saints over the last few years. A lot of meh moves. So, I mean, in this spot here, honestly, I also hate to do this, but I think I'm going to do it. I think I'm going to go Will Johnson, cornerback out of Michigan. I think that they need to help on the defensive side of the ball. Will Johnson is one of the best cornerbacks in the draft, if not the best, out of Michigan. Again, this is another player that I would have liked to seen fall to the 49ers. So it's going to take me about 10 minutes to make a pick for the 49ers at pick 11. But yeah, I'm going to go ahead here. I'm going to go Will Johnson. There's a lot of areas here. This is the problem with the New Orleans Saints here. The New Orleans Saints are kind of a wild card here in this spot because they have so many areas in which they can improve. Obviously, offensive guard, wide receiver. They They were the only team in the NFL last year to not have a wide receiver with, I believe, 40 or more targets, which is wild. It was some number right around there. I'll confirm. I'll vet it. But yeah, it was that basically the wide receiver was in shambles, and they've already, like I said, lost Marquez Valdez-Scantling, however much you want to value that. So I'm going to go Will Johnson here, though. They do need cornerback. They need edge rusher. But yeah, give me Will Johnson here, drafted to the New Orleans Saints. And if this draft does happen the way that I'm saying it happens, I'm going to be very pissed off. So,
well, the
what
only
do you
thing
got there?
the only thing I would say is I could see them going edge. It just feels like such a Saints pick. Cam Jordan is coming
That is
back.
true.
But I think Will Johnson there is fine. I think, like you said, they have a lot of needs. And so I'm fine there. And I think the Chicago Bears would be pretty happy in this spot because this is a team that, at the 10 spot, they also have issues, especially in the trenches on the defensive side of the football. You could also say O-line as well. I know people think Jeanty's the pick. I wouldn't be surprised if they went with an offensive lineman. And I'm going to go with Armand Meboue. I was thinking on the edge and defensive side of the football, but when we look at everything Ben Johnson is coming from in Detroit, building the trenches, we've seen what they've done in free agency. I know that they've brought in help, but I'm not so sure that they're married to the tackles that they have. And Meboue is very athletic. This is a guy that could also be possibly kicked inside as a guard. And I mean, arguably the best, offensive line prospect in this class. Like I said, people might give me flack for it because, I feel like they've addressed those needs. But if Ashton Jeanty's not there, I think that Armand Meboue is probably a solid pick. It would be him or an edge. I'm going to go with him there. I feel like they're going to continue to compound on a strength, something that's becoming a strength for them possibly. I think they're going to continue, and I think Ben Johnson's going to take what he learned from his time with the Lions, and he's going to implement it here with the Chicago Bears, and I think we're already seeing it this offseason.
Yeah, it's absolutely hard to argue with that pick at all. I mean, I agree. If Jeanty's there, then it's a different conversation. But outside of that, yeah, they're going to keep hammering this offensive line. I talked about earlier when we talked about, Aaron Glenn going to the Jets and, the whole lineage back to Detroit and hammering the lines. I think that's a thing. You talk about coaching trees and things that people develop. You talk about everything. You think back to the whole Shanahan, McVay, McDaniel, all that. And like, we see that trickle down effect. So I think we could very much see that in play here for the Chicago Bears for sure. I have zero pushback on that whatsoever.
Cool.
So,
all right. Well, you're up now with your team. So what do we got?
So my 49ers, as per usual, it's the stories are different, but the drama remains the same. There's a lot going on here. There was what perceived to be a mass exodus here with the 49ers, but really a lot of these guys, they weren't going to bring these guys back. You talk about a Talanoa Hufanga, a Dre Greenlaw. Love them both. They went to the Broncos, but there were some injury concerns there, and I'm waiting for the story on Dre Greenlaw, but I got a feeling it had to do with the years. I mean, he gets 3 years from the Broncos. I don't think the Niners were ever offering that. They've lost Aaron Banks in the offensive line, Travarius Ward, who if you're in the know, you knew he wasn't coming back. Then there's a lot of other guys, Leonard Floyd, and I think that blew up in their face because they thought that they were going to get Joey Bosa.
Yeah.
And on Monday night, that did not happen, and I was not happy about that either. In this case, I'm going to go with an edge rusher here. I mentioned the defensive tackles is one of the worst rooms in the NFL for the 49ers and in the entire NFL. It's not much better on the edge either. I know Nick Bosa is there. So give me Shamar Stewart out of Texas A&M. I think that's where they go here. I know I joked around a bit about how losing some of these other players, I wouldn't love it. But if it ends up that we can go ahead and get Stewart here, I'll take Stewart. Pete, I'm curious for your thoughts here, your thoughts on Stewart. And just, again, I know the Niners are, a couple of years removed from being in the Super Bowl, but they have a lot of work to do. So what are your thoughts here?
Yeah, I mean, I think Shamar Stewart, right? he's a guy that production hasn't been there, but he's an absolute freak. He killed it at the Senior Bowl. He didn't even play in the game because he just did so well. I mean, I'm pulling it up here: 6'6", 290 pounds. He's not even 22 years old, and I mean, honestly, people will go back and forth. If a team falls in love with his athletic traits, like, I wouldn't be surprised. He's a wild card in this class because, look, you have other edges that, like, personally for me, I like Mike Green, right? James Pierce Jr. is number one on a lot of people's boards, but there are concerns with him when it comes to, personal stuff in the background. I mean, you look at his rank here by PFF, 12, but he's being drafted 20. You look at Mike Green, right? He's being drafted higher, even though he's below him on their rankings. And so, to me, I think Shamar Stewart's fine there. If edge is a need, I could see them going edge with him there because, again, his talents, he's an athletic freak. So I like Shamar Stewart. I'm excited. He reminds me a lot of Jadeveon Clowney, but not as good of, like, not as many, like, moves in terms of pass rush moves, but the way he plays, and the freak, like the freak size. That's who he reminds me. He's obviously thicker and larger, but the length and the power, they remind me of a lot of each other. So we sit here with the Dallas Cowboys, who really haven't done a ton in this offseason. Dallas Cowboys, I mean, taking a look here at their free agent acquisitions, it's been a lot of small stuff, right? They brought in Miles Sanders, they bring in Javonte Williams, they retained a bunch of guys. Oza Adigwazua, D tackle, 4 years, $80 million contract.
Good job on pronouncing that name.
I have no idea if that was accurate, but I did my best.
Sound like you nailed it.
They bring back Kavonte Turpin, 3 years, $18 million. I mean, a lot of just retaining guys. They bring in their free agent signings has been pretty much bargain bin. Dante Fowler, 1 year, $8 million. Pretty much all 1 year deals. It seems like Dallas is not trying to hitch their wagon onto many guys, like, past 1 year deals, because I think they're preparing for, if things don't work this year, is there a reset coming? So, and they got to get Micah Parsons' deal done. But,
right.
This is a team that has a decent amount of needs. I don't think running back's in the cards here. I know running back looks like a need here, but, Miles Sanders and Javonte, while they're not sexy, I think those are depth picks and pieces that they, signed for that specifically. Now, they do lose an edge rusher. DeMarcus Lawrence is gone, but they also sign an edge rusher as well. So is edge a need? I mean, Dante Flower, 1 year, $8 million. I don't think that should be, make it exclusive for them to not sign somebody. Honestly, I'm thinking wide receiver possibly here. Matthew Golden has been shooting up people's draft boards. When you look, I mean, I'm trying to see if I can see where he is. Yeah, they don't have his information as to where he lined up. CeeDee Lamb plays a slot. Okay, here they do right here. So yeah, I mean, he can split out wide. Honestly, it would be a nice weapon for Dak Prescott. I'm going to go with Matthew Golden, a guy that can take the top off, while CeeDee Lamb is a guy that can work the middle of the field in the slot, and Matthew Golden can work outside. So I'm talking myself into this, but I think Matthew Golden's going to be my pick. It's not something that I came into today thinking, but the more and more I look at their team, and the more and more I feel like running back is not in the mix anymore, I think it's wide receiver or edge for them, and I think Matthew Golden would be a good pick, splitting out wide for them.
Well, the other thing on top of that is, I talked about the Patriots earlier, wanting a wide receiver. And, is wide receiver as big of a need for the Dallas Cowboys as it was for the Patriots? Obviously not. But
right.
But it is something like, for example, Cooper Kupp. Obviously, we know he went to Seattle. He went home to Washington. But, he was a name that, I mean, I know Jane Slater said he wasn't, but there were other sources who said he
Yeah.
was a
I can't.
possibility for the Cowboys.
Yeah. It's been a weird year off season with media this year. I'm not gonna lie. There's a
Yeah,
lot more people, Diana Rossini. There's so many people getting involved now. Not that there wasn't in years past, but we've been getting some really shitty information. I feel like a lot of these people are working for these agents because that's where they get the news and sources a lot of times.
yeah.
And we're just getting such bad information from guys that I feel like and girls that are just becoming mouthpieces for these agents. So I do think Cooper Cup. I mean, he had a relationship, I think, with the wide receivers coach. So yeah, I think Cooper Cup was definitely a possibility for them.
And don't you find it interesting too, by the way, that if you're on X and you follow all these signings this year,
Mm.
they're mentioning the agents involved. They're
Hmm.
mentioning right.
Yeah,
So you
it's
would,
like a shout out. It's like a shout
right.
out.
So I think that goes into your point of the whole bit where it's like they're all jockeying for position, they're all going back and forth. Um, yeah,
Well,
I can.
and you look at Jordan Schultz and you look at Ari and you look at it used to be just Rappaport and Schefter. Now, if you have notifications on, you're getting a notification almost the same exact writing from Schultz, Ian, and Schefter at the same exact time. So, I mean, are these agents kind of bleeding things to them and saying like, hey, like, we're signing release at this time, and they just have these pre-written tweets and they're just getting sent out on time.
I get it could be. I
I
mean,
mean,
you also see a lot of the old typing errors, which I'm a big fan of.
yeah. Well,
The old
and a
typos.
lot of times I think too, I think Schefter copies a lot sometimes these tweets because somebody had called him out. I think it was, he had like Ari, I think had put down like a list of players. I don't remember if it was acquisitions for a team or the list of wide receivers available, but like Schefter like had the names of the players like in the same exact order, like a few minutes later, and just added like a football emoji next to every single guy. Like, it sucks, dude. Honestly, I just feel like it's getting worse and worse.
Yeah, no, you're not wrong. I mean, it definitely is getting worse and worse, but yeah, so but that is something I noticed that all of a sudden all these agents are getting tagged left and right. I was like,
Yeah,
that's new and different. So, but
it's
all right,
weird.
whatever. This is the arms race we're living in as social media continues to evolve. So,
Yeah.
whatever. Let's go with it. Let's go up next. We got the Miami Dolphins up here. This is what, pick 13 right now. So there's some needs here in the trenches, most specifically. Safety has now become a position of need, linebacker as well. Um, if I'm going to go ahead here, I'm going to go offensive lineman here. And if I'm going to go guard here, and I'm going to go with a Tyler Booker out of Alabama as my pick here. Either way, it's just you're going to hear this from a lot of teams. They're going to be hammering the trenches again. I mentioned defensive line is going to get hammered a lot, but offensive line will too. I'm going to go with a Tyler Booker here. I think they're going to try and shore up the offensive line through the draft the best they possibly can. So, Pete, what are some of your thoughts here on that pick? I mean, they brought in James Daniels. They brought in some other names here, but not really a lot to address the offensive line. I mean, Larry Broom on a 1-year deal, losing Robert Jones. So, what are your thoughts here? Bring in Tyler Booker for the Dolphins.
Yeah, so this is an interesting one. I've actually gone back and forth with Matt specifically on this guy. So Matt seems to feel opposite of me. When you look at the kinds of run plays or most of the plays, like to me, Tyler Booker is more fit for like a power run scheme, whereas I feel you know, when you look at the Dolphins, they run more of a zone scheme. Matt feels different. Matt thinks that he can probably fit in both. and that could be true. The only pushback that I would have is,
Mhm.
Teron Armstead looks like he could be retiring. He's now he restructured to the vet minimum, and he's letting the team know. So with tackles, being, there's a decent amount of tackles left on the board. I personally think that they would go tackle there, but I could
Got
also see
some.
them going Booker if they get more information, right? Like, Teron Armstead might not retire, and they might have good information by then, but they also might want to draft a tackle because Tua's had all these issues, and they definitely don't want to be in a bad spot at that position. But I don't have issue with Tyler Booker because honestly, it's a good call. He's been rumored to them a lot. And it seems like they like him from all the reports that I've seen. But my gut tells me they go tackle. But I could see Tyler Booker. I think it's a fine call.
So we do have some breaking news, though. The San Francisco 49ers are trading Jordan Mason to the Minnesota Vikings.
Interesting.
He gets a 2-year deal over $7 million, fully guaranteed at signing, with a maximum of $12 million. Negotiated by Jason and Michael Katz, because why would we not mention agents? That's coming from Ian Rappaport. So there you go. So
yeah, so I guess my question: Jordan Mason was restricted, or
I believe we
tendered.
put a second rounder on that.
Yeah, so I don't. They might have negotiated a different
Yeah.
deal because I doubt anybody traded a two. I doubt the Vikings traded a second for him.
I agree.
But
I'd
I
be
think
tap dancing.
that's a good deal for them, though. Honestly, I
Yeah, it
think
is. Yeah.
bringing him in is good. Backup Aaron Jones. It allows them to not have to worry about running back on the board. But all right, so we're here with the Colts now, and I think I want to take a look here.
I can't stand people.
Oh, what's that?
Just 49ers Twitter. They, talking about the tight end they brought in, and I said he's blocking, like he's brought in to block, and people say, "Oh, you could have drafted that too." People just think like that we're in this fantasy football world where people just assume, "Oh, well, anybody can block, right? Like anybody can do it." Hey, stop just bringing that guy. Mike Gesicki played his way out of Miami because he didn't know how to block. That meant something. I'm just saying, these fucking people. Anyway, sorry. Go on. I'm done.
You're
I'm fine.
good.
It's gonna be fine. It's gonna be fine.
All right. Well, let's move over to the Colts here.
Yep.
So the Colts, honestly, that before free agency, I had them and the Falcons pinned to likely draft the safety here out of South Carolina, Nick Amanwari. He had an awesome pro day. I'm sorry, he had an awesome combine, tested off the charts. And when you look at Ballard's history, he's a very big RAS guy, raw athletic score. And I thought Malachi Starks would be the guy to them, but I think if they were going to pick between the two, it would be the guy from South Carolina. But they also brought in the guy from the Vikings, and so I think that changes their plans. They brought in Bynum, Cameron Bynum, 4 years, $60 million. So I think that's off the table. One thing to note about the Falcons as they're coming up is the Falcons are pretty much meeting with like only defensive players, from what I heard with the combine. So it seems very likely. I think both of these teams are going to look defense here. I think given the fact that Tyler Warren is still on the board, I think Tyler Warren makes a lot of sense. I know I said both defense, but if Warren falls here, I think they go Tyler Warren, and if not, I think they're likely going to go edge because they just brought somebody in at safety to kind of help them out there. But I think Tyler Warren makes sense too. They've been looking for their tight end there for a pretty long time now in Dallas, and Tyler Warren would definitely fit the bill for what that offense wants to do.
You mean in Indianapolis? You said.
Yes.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah. No, I could see that definitely being a thing. Yeah, it's kind of funny. It's always been like an island of misfit toys there.
Yeah.
Mo Alley. I mean, we've come a long, far way from the ways of Dallas Clark back in the day. So yeah, no, I like that pickup. I would sign off on that. I just God help anybody drafted to the Indianapolis Colts with what's going on there at the quarterback position. But if there's one thing you could say, if it's a quarterback in need, if it's a quarterback in trouble, or if it's a rookie quarterback, what do they always go to? They always go to tight end. They always look for them. So yeah, I think this could be a nice spot. So
I agree.
I will buy into that. I am just updating some of my stuff here because my thing just closed on me. So why don't you say something nice about something else and give me 30 seconds?
Yeah. So
That'll
I
be
mean,
really helpful.
right now, let me take a review of the board just in case anybody's listening and not watching while Hoff checks his stuff out. So at number 1, we have Cam Ward going to the Titans. Number 2, Travis Hunter going to the Browns. Number 3, Shedeur Sanders going to the Giants. Number 4, Tutorial McMillan at 4, the Pats. Abdul Carter at 5 to the Jags. Ashton Jeanty at 6 to the Raiders. Will Campbell at 7 to the Jets. Mason Graham at 8 to the Carolina Panthers. Number 9, the Saints take Will Johnson. At 10, the Bears take Armand Meboue. At 11, the 49ers take Shamar Stewart. At 12, the Indianapolis Cowboys take Matthew Golden. 13,
Indianapolis
Tyler
Cowboys. That's the
Booker.
second time you mentioned it. Or
What did you say?
you said Indianapolis Cowboys.
I got my wires crossed.
Yes, you do.
Um, the Miami Dolphins take Tyler Booker out of Alabama, guard, and then at 14, Tyler Warren, tight end to the Colts. And now you are on the clock off with the Atlanta Falcons.
Yes. So the Atlanta Falcons, they do have some needs here. They did lose Drew Dalman, which it was always known that they were going to lose him pretty much,
Yeah.
but it is still a big blow to that offensive line. Not the first time that they have lost a big time center there. Remember Alex Mack a couple of years ago. Grady Jarrett also gone. They did bring in some names, Mike Hughes, Leonard Floyd, which was one that hurt me. But outside of that, they have some improvements to make here. Cornerback is a position of need. You look at D tackle, the edge. So I do think that this could be a possible edge rusher spot, in my opinion. I do think that their first round pick will be defensive. I'm gonna go Michael Williams here, edge rusher out of Georgia. I'm gonna plug him in here for the Atlanta Falcons. Again, still more work needs to be done there. But I'm curious for your thoughts on that pickup.
No, I think Michael Williams is fine spot. Out of Georgia, he's been highly productive there. Good run defender, and this is a team that they were one of the worst. I mean, I think they were bottom 5 in sacks last year.
I believe
Um,
so. Yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, this is a good pick him here. I like Mikel Williams. A lot of these edges, I mean, they're very clumped together, right? It's hard to kind of separate some of them. I mean, Mike Green is my favorite edge in this class. James Pierce for some is the others, but again, James Pierce with these concerns, we just don't know how far he's going to slip. So I'm good with Mikel Williams there at 15. I think it's a good landing spot for him. Now, we're over here next with the Arizona Cardinals, and the Arizona Cardinals, they haven't made a ton of noise. They were trying to get Milton Williams. They unfortunately missed out on him, not for a lack of trying. They did retain Baron Browning on a 2-year, $15 million deal. Zay Jones is back. A couple in-house signings, nothing crazy, but they did bring in Josh Sweat on a 4-year, $76 million deal. That was their big splash. Dalvin Tomlinson, 2 years, $29 million at D tackle. Jacoby Brissett on a 2-year, $12.5 million deal, and then a couple smaller, signings, nothing crazy. So I think Josh Sweat kind of alleviates their edge, needs in terms of. I don't think that that's a route that they would go. I do want to look because I know corner is a need for them here, and I'm gonna go with Jahdae Barron out of Texas. I have him ranked as my number 1 corner on the board. Will Johnson, like Hoff said, is also extremely talented. So I think it's probably likely Jahdae or him going top 10, and then one of them might slip kind of where we are here now. But Jahdae Brown is a super versatile player. When you look at him and where he lined up, 122 snaps in the slot. He played in the box 142 times. He played in the box a ton in his career. And then obviously he played, at corner. But even if you look at his 2023 season, like he played in the slot a ton and didn't even play. Like this is a guy that's just been able to be moved around a ton, coming off a 5 interception season, only allowing a 34.2 passer rating, no touchdowns. 37 catches on 68 targets. So pretty much less than around a 50% completion percentage. And he played way more snaps this year than he did last year. I mean, over 300 more. So I like Jahdae Barron. This is a coach in Jonathan Gannon who, believes in his defense, has those guys fighting and playing for them. And I think you get a guy like Jahdae Barron who, you have Budda Baker on this team already who kind of moves around similar. Obviously, he plays safety. I think
Yep.
Jahdae Barron could be a nice piece for a defense that could use some more talent there.
Yeah, I like that pick. Yeah, again, you mentioned the Josh Sweat move is a big one. This Arizona Cardinals team, obviously, they bring in Jonathan Gannon. I'll say this. I mean, the record might not always reflect it, but if you're a fan of the NFC West or if you watch the Arizona Cardinals at all, it's a team that fights.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's Jonathan Gannon's been able to stay in good favor over there. I like that pickup. I think they're gonna. I feel like I'm a broken record saying this. Well, I'm more so a broken record saying that teams are going to hammer the trenches, but I do think that the Cardinals will hammer defense in this draft. So I like that pick. I think it's a very solid pick. So kudos to you on that one. We
Yep.
will now scoot over to the Cincinnati Bengals, who, listen, they are finally spending money this offseason because as of yesterday, they were close, supposedly, to deals with both Jamar Chase and T. Higgins as both of their wide receivers there. Again, very un-Bengal-like. They usually don't spend a lot of money, so kudos to them. I do think, though, they need to do work on the defensive side of the ball. They've got a lot going on there, a lot of departures, retirements, so on and so forth. They've brought in some names here defensively, but none that really jump off the page. Defensive tackles, defensive ends, nothing that really gets me going here. But if I got to look on the defensive side of the ball here for the Cincinnati Bengals, a way to start to improve that team via the draft where you've got some rookie control money wise, I'm going to go with James Pierce Jr. out of Tennessee as an edge rusher here. The whole defensive line needs to be worked on, and I know that they do have some need at guard offensively, but I do think that they're going to look to go defense here in the first round of this NFL draft. So give me James Pierce out of Tennessee. Curious for your thoughts here. The defense again. I believe Lou Amaro was a scapegoat of sorts. I think he's better than what we saw last year. Whatever. He went from being head coach candidate to being fired. So be that as it may, I do think they need to upgrade defense. Curious for your thoughts there.
Yeah, I think defense is the right call. More of a matter of, again, who they go with. We talked about James Pierce. A lot of the people have James Pierce as their number one rated edge on the board, but there's some character concerns there. The biggest thing with James Pierce that I have for him is you look at a guy like Mike Green. You look at some of these other edges, right? 766. 719. And then you look at the snaps that James Pierce played, only 464. They rotated a ton in Tennessee. That was a very talented defense there. And I mean, this is a guy that played half of the snaps. He had a lot of gas in the tank because he was constantly rotated on and off the field. Now, you could say he also had less opportunity to make plays because he wasn't on the field nearly as much as the other guys, right? For me, I still have Mike Green ahead of him. I know he's a talented player. I wouldn't fault you for taking him there because I think somebody's going to fall in love with his talent. And Mike Green is also a guy from Marshall, right? I mean, small school. Does a team take a shot on a guy like him? And so I could see that. Now, Seattle Seahawks are interesting here, man. Reason that the Seattle Seahawks are so interesting is because this is a team that's pretty much going through a soft rebuild, and people don't really understand what a soft rebuild means. But
no, they don't.
I mean, yeah, I think I had an argument with somebody the other day, and they're telling me that they're not going through a soft rebuild. They just moved on from a bunch of their big time players, and look. they weren't planning on moving on from Geno Smith. Geno Smith wanted to be traded. DK Metcalf wanted to be traded. These are two guys that
Yeah.
requested trades. Like,
DK
they,
Metcalf was in a bunch of trade rumors too,
oh,
around
yeah,
the trade deadline, if you remember.
absolutely. And I mean, I think like when you look at some of the moves that they've made, they just brought in Cooper Cup. They brought in Sam Darnold. Like these are not like rebuild moves, like to me. Now, what they did with Darnold is smart in terms of look, there's not a ton of guaranteed money on the deal. They could
No.
easily, it's pretty much a 1 year deal, and if they want to keep him, they can. Not a ton of guaranteed money attached after year one. But I mean, they have some issues here, right? They need some help on defense. They have a defensive minded head coach. They also need some help on the offensive line as well. A lot of people aren't really sold on what they have. I'm not going to go ahead and draft a wide receiver because look, they just brought in Cooper Cup. They're paying him $15.5 million next to JSN. I don't think that they want to mess up JSN's growth and bring in another receiver, right? And they're not going to have Cooper Cup sit on the bench. So I don't see that happening. But I struggle with them here because I don't really like this offensive line, to be honest with you.
Mm.
I don't know how sold they
That's
are.
my biggest concern for Sam Darnold, honestly.
Yeah, and well, that and with Sam Darnold, um, it's about like he's playing outside in bad weather. Like he had a great year, but he was playing in a dome. And then when he was good in college, he was playing in USC, which is another place with good weather. But when I look at this offensive line for the Seattle Seahawks, look, they have Charles Cross, who they took in 2002, round 3 with the 72 overall pick. He's had his ups and downs. He started off with a really good rookie year. And he's going into his third season. You also take a look at their no, I'm sorry, that was Abraham Lucas. I don't know why I said Charles Cross. But I believe Charles Cross and Abraham Lucas were also same class. Yeah, 2022. Charles Cross was round 1, pick number 9. I honestly really wouldn't be surprised if they go O-line here. But I'm not going to get crazy. I
Hmm.
said a whole lot of all of that just to not take offensive line because I'm trying to talk myself out of it. So I'm
All
gonna go
right.
edge here, though. I'll go with Mike Green. I do think they're gonna address their interior offensive line, and we'll see that. But for now, I'll go Mike Green out of Marshall, who's my favorite edge rusher in this class, and arguably my number one guy in this class. I think that's kind of where I'm leaning towards as we get closer.
Yeah, I'm not gonna push back too hard on that pick of Green. I do ultimately think that they go offensive line here, but again, you laid
Yeah,
down the whole groundwork of why they would need to pick offensive line. I know you went another way, but teams have more than one position of need. Um, I ultimately think that they are going to go offensive line here, but
yeah,
I do think Green is a nice pick on the defensive side of the ball. I mean, this is a team too that they do have a decent amount of work that needs to be done, much like the Arizona Cardinals, who we just talked about a little bit ago. So I'm not going to kill you on the pick. I personally would go with an offensive lineman. But yeah, Green works out in this spot for sure.
yeah. And Kevin, just in case you missed, yeah, we actually did take Jeanty for the Raiders. So you are correct in your guess there. Hoff, one thing I wanted to note about the Seattle Seahawks, you know,
Sure.
they did bring in DeMarcus Lawrence on a 3-year, $42 million deal. Obviously, they bring in Darnold, Valdez Scantling, and then Josh Jones on a 1-year, $4.7 million deal at O line. So I mean, look, you can make the argument that DeMarcus Lawrence maybe fends them off from not bringing in an edge. I could see it. It just really depends. I mean, this is a coaching staff that's not married to both of their tackles. They came in after they were drafted. That was Pete Carroll's last year when they drafted Abraham Lucas and Charles Cross. So I could definitely see them going tackle there. But you're up here with the Bucks at number 19.
Yeah, Buccaneers, let's just cut the foreplay. Let's just say right now the biggest needs are on the defensive side of the ball. They seem to be doing pretty good at all their other positions offensively. So they brought in Hassan Reddick, they brought in Anthony Nelson. Outside of that, I mean, Greg Gaines, they didn't really do a lot else defensively. They've lost a couple names on the defensive side of the ball. So if I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to go defense here again. There are a lot of needs, but I'm going to go with the secondary here. The secondary is, I believe, one of the biggest positions of need. They allowed a lot in the passing game last year. So I'm going to go safety, and I'm going to go with Malachi Starks out of the University of Georgia. I think that'll help set up the secondary. Obviously, a lot of work to do on the corners. Plenty of time to address that, but yeah, I'm gonna go with Malachi Starks here, the safety. I don't see a scenario in which the Tampa Bay Buccaneers draft anything offensively in the first round. Pete, if you have any pushback on that, feel free. But and again, there are a lot of players that can be taken here on the defensive side of the ball. Again, I mentioned it, a lot of needs there, but for me, I'll go safety. I'll go with Starks, which I believe, as per our mock, would be the first safety off the board, if I'm not mistaken.
So,
I believe.
yeah, I guess we didn't. I thought, you know what, that was what it was. Because with the Falcons, you went with Michael Williams, right? And
Yep.
then obviously that would be slipping where we would see that the guy, Nick, I'm gonna butcher his name, so I'm just gonna pull him up real quick. Yeah,
Nick
Imamwari.
Manawari?
Yeah, from South Carolina, right? I mean, it's tough. I don't know what the teams are going to value. I mean, they're very close on tape, but he tested a lot better than Starks. But it wasn't that Starks tested bad. Mukawari just tested like an absolute freak. So I mean, it's hard to say what teams value more, right?
Sure.
Obviously, my Denver Broncos are up here, and Denver Broncos, right? They added some flexibility, right? Where they bring in. They bring in Evan Ingram now. So do they go tight end here? You have Colston Loveland as a possibility. Do they go running back? Or in my opinion, do they go? I think wide receivers out of the question. I'll continue to tell people that based on everything that I've heard.
Yeah.
I just I don't think I don't think that's the route they go.
It's a position of need, but it's not imperative,
Right.
Yeah.
I think they like their guys there. I think Omar Hampton is the guy. I think they would take Hampton there if they're at 20 and he falls, unless they have somebody that they absolutely love that slipped. I'm going to take Omar Hampton there. I think he would fit really well in Sean Payton's system. He's a guy that has really good vision as a running back, can find the cutback zones, and he can catch the football, right? And so I think that's a little bit what Sean Payton's looking like. He can be a mismatch out of the backfield if asked to do so. So I like Omar and Hampton the more and more we get closer and the Broncos make their decisions and their moves. If they didn't bring in Evan Ingram, I could see Colson Loveland. I still don't think it's out of the question that they bring in another tight end like Loveland. But I'll go Omar and Hampton here at the 20 spot.
All right. Yeah. No, I don't hate it. I mean, again, when I did my free agent predictions, best landing spots, I did have Najee Harris going to the Denver Broncos. So I obviously knew running back was a position of need there. And as many, good names that they brought in, I mean, Anthony, Pete, you mentioned Evan Ingram. You go back to earlier on the show when I mentioned Talanoa Funga, Dre Greenlaw. So they've brought in plenty of good names, but nothing in terms of running back. So yeah, I dig that pick here quite a bit. So yeah, I'm gonna go with you on that, and hopefully you're riding sky high here with your
Yeah, I'd be very happy. I'm honestly just happy with Denver's offseason. I think that they can they've allowed themselves some flexibility to pretty much do, take best player available if they really wanted to at this spot. But this is where things get a little bit interesting with the Steelers here at 21. What are your thoughts here for them?
This is where I'm going with, I guess it's a bit of a curveball. Maybe it's not, but right now, as of this recording, as the world turns, we are waiting for Aaron Rodgers to make a decision, which, by the way, he's allowed to take as much time as he wants, but he hasn't made a decision yet. It is down to, I believe, the Steelers and the Vikings. I know Mike Silver reported that Aaron Rodgers wants to go to Minnesota. I don't know how true that is. So again, like you mentioned, Pete, we've gotten a lot of
I want a lot of things in life. That doesn't mean I get them.
there is also that aspect, but we've gotten a lot of shady reporting, as you mentioned. I'm going to go quarterback here. I'm going to go Jackson Dart. I'm saying Jackson Dart goes off the board here to the Pittsburgh Steelers. Yes, there are other positions in need here. They brought in DK Metcalf. We'll see what they do with George Pickens. As of now, he's still there. Running back is something you'd like to see them add a piece on, but I think that they could wait to do that. Talk about defensive tackle, but to me, I'm going to go quarterback. I'm going to say Jackson Dart. And I think that there's a potential that even if they do draft Aaron Rodgers, which maybe this is why Aaron Rodgers hasn't signed yet, maybe they told Aaron, hey, we're drafting a QB first round. Um, I know Aaron Rodgers has said he doesn't mind tutoring a young quarterback, but does he want to be unseated in year one if things aren't going so hot? I think that there is a little, while I don't buy into how big people say Rodgers' ego is, I do think there is that. He doesn't want to go to a team and in the first year lose that starting quarterback job. But I'm going to go Jackson Dart here, regardless of whether they bring in Aaron Rodgers or not. Not sure how much of a curveball that is, but
No, I think it's fine. People really either love it or hate it with Jackson Dart, and everybody is so shell shocked with Kenny Pickett with the last time they drafted a quarterback because Kenny Pickett felt like he was the first quarterback taken in a really bad quarterback class, and it just people felt like the Steelers were just taking him because they needed a quarterback, and he was the best one. And so people kind of are saying similar to Jackson Dart, but I think Jackson Dart's talented, man. I think I have him ahead of Shedeur Sanders. Like, I know it sounds
a lot of
crazy.
people do.
Yeah, I just from what I've seen, I think the upside is there for Jackson Dart. I think he played really well. I don't hate the pick at all. There's so many
I
variables with
should
the Steelers, though.
I should quickly just interrupt you because I said a lot of people say that, and I didn't want to diminish your take. A lot of people that are in the know
Sure.
have Jackson Dart over Shedeur Sanders. If you go around to the bagel store tomorrow morning and talk to some guys that are wearing a football hoodie, they're going to say, "Oh, who's Jackson Dart?" So,
Yeah.
they're going to say, obviously, Shedeur's better. So, yeah, but just give you a little bit of whatever.
No, so this one's tough, right? Because Kenneth Grant is still on the board. And it's really hard to look at him and not take him for the Chargers, right? Because of the Michigan ties. But then you have Colson Loveland and you have a Chargers team who, had Evan Ingram in the building with Denver and did not land on a deal with Evan Ingram. Colson Loveland played for Harbaugh, right? Like it's a position of need for them. Is that the route that they go, or do they go Kenneth Grant? I mean, it's tough to see Kenneth Grant. I mean, I don't think he would last longer, but just given the fact that they clearly, are looking to address this position, and it's a guy that played under Harbaugh, I'm going to go with Colson Loveland here at 22 for the Chargers. I just think the connection with Harbaugh, it's hard to ignore, and it's a position of need, and there's not a ton to say on it, really. I think it would be a good fit there, and that offense could definitely use a playmaker like him. So.
Yeah, listen, this show would be a lot more fun if I was arguing with you and yelling at you and telling you that you're an idiot, but you are not an idiot on this one. And if the roles are reversed and if I was picking for the Chargers, I'd go the same exact way. It makes too much sense, obviously, with the Michigan ties, but you even look at this past year, over there in Los Angeles, what they brought in Hayden Hurst, and Hayden Hurst was jammed up. He barely even played. You saw some good stuff out of Will Dissly for a couple weeks, but there's no pillar there at the tight end position. There's nobody who's gonna plant the flag and say, I am the tight end in this offense. So yeah, I think this stabilizes the position very much so. And obviously very familiar with Jim Harbaugh. So it just makes too much sense for this to not happen. So yeah. I agree wholeheartedly with that one.
Yeah, the only thing I'd say is going back to the Jackson Dart pick, Zach Linton said he reminds him of Baker. Yeah, I actually kind of get a similar vibe. I think it's the build, it's the size. I think it makes a lot of sense. Blake comes in here and says, would love, big Walter Nolan fan after watching Grant's film. Yeah, I would take Grant over Walter Nolan. Definitely. I think this is the point where you probably see a little bit of a run on interior defenders because it's probably the deepest part in the draft. And I mean, Hoff, when we take a look here, I mean, the interior defenders left. I mean, you have Kenneth Grant, Derek Harmon, Walter Nolan. I mean, Darius Alexander out of Toledo, who Toledo hasn't had. I don't think they've had a player go in the first round until last year, which was Quinyon Mitchell ever. So Darius Alexander goes first round. That would be 2 in 2 years. So good for them. But either way, you have the Packers here at 23. They were in the market for DK Metcalf. They didn't land him. Jair Alexander's on the way out. Wide receiver, cornerback. We see edges in need. Is interior defensive line in need? Because, so what do you think? What do you think here for the Packers?
Well, I think, and by the way, a team that really hasn't been that active in free agency. They've only brought in 2 players so far. But I think defense is the obvious play here. If I'm going to go ahead and take a look at this, edge rush is a position of need. Obviously, we're talking about interior defensive line as well. I'm going to go on the cornerback side, though, and I'm going to go Siobhan Ravel of Eastern Carolina. Again, you can make the case for a lot of positions here. Again, defensive line will be. I know you said you're getting sick that Kenneth Grant is still out there, hasn't been picked up yet, and that could be the other play here. If I didn't go with Ravel here, I'd probably go that way. But I do think that they're going to try and help out this secondary. So I'm going to go Siobhan Ravel. I just feel like they're always trying to help the secondary. They're always trying to help the defensive side of the ball, it seems. And just, sometimes these defenses in Green Bay are good, but they always seem this time of year, they're going back to it. They have to upgrade it yet again. So I think they're in that position again. I think they go cornerback here. But again, I could just as easily see them going with interior defensive line.
Yeah, I think it's a fine pick. I happen to really like Amos at cornerback. I think the last time we did this draft, Trey Amos. I don't know if we got Trey Amos down to the Packers, but Amos. Yeah, I like Amos better than Siobhan Ravel. But yeah, I mean, I don't hate it. It's a position of need for them, so I'm totally on board with that. Then you have the Minnesota Vikings here, and Minnesota was extremely active, in free agency. Yes. We're still kind of figuring things out. Like, is Rodgers gonna? I think the big thing with the Rodgers thing right now, it's more if Rodgers signs with them. It has more to do with JJ McCarthy not being on schedule with his knee than it has to do with them not believing that he can play. This team, for all the reports, pretty much have said that they love him. Everything coming out last year to the rehab, like I think they're bought in on him, and so yeah, I'm confident that's probably has to be the reason, but we'll see what happens.
Where do you think Rodgers goes?
I think he's using them as leverage, and I think he's going to the Steelers. I don't think he goes to the Giants. I think he's going to go to the Steelers. The only reason I could see Giants, and people keep saying, why would he go to the Giants? It's not that crazy when you think about it because, dude, he lives there right now. Like
there is something to it.
He's been there for 2 years, and he seems like he really likes New York. Like he was playing in Wisconsin for his career. Like I think he likes New York, and it would be a way to stick it to that, media where, he's going to stay there and go to the other team and prove that to them that he can still play. So, but going to the Minnesota Vikings here, I think this is pretty much where, when we talk about all these different guys sliding, I think this is pretty much at this point, I would go with Kenneth Grant here. They do have a need there on the interior. There's not super far Michigan from Minnesota. So, I'm sure they're very familiar. They probably have ties up there, a lot of scouts, and have probably gotten a lot of feedback. And I think Kenneth Grant would be, I think Minnesota would be running to the running to hand the pick in if Kenneth Grant fell there. You can make the case for Walter Nolan. I could see it, but I think Kenneth Grant for sure would be too hard to pass up for them.
No, yeah, and it's about time that he finds himself a home. I think it's a nice home there with Minnesota, and yeah, they've done a ton of work, like you said, this offseason. So I think it's a good move for them, and I like it. I like it, even though I
Yeah,
know
well,
didn't go the pick prior, which maybe that helps what you were talking about with how you could make cases for other players.
yeah.
Maybe those are cases that slide in there into that spot 25,
Well, I would say that when talking about a team that's made a lot of moves,
24.
I don't necessarily love the moves for the next team, the Houston Texans. I think it's obvious where they go here, but what are you thinking?
Yeah, the Texans have had a bit of a interesting offseason. I mean, they traded Tunsil away. They brought in some names here. Laken Tomlinson, Mario Edwards on the defensive side of the ball, Tremont Smith. Just nothing that's really wowing you. Not like remember last offseason when they brought in Joe Mixon and it was like, oh wow. It's like, all right, these guys are going for it. A lot
Yeah,
different this offseason, much more quieter in Houston, which kind of resembles the difference between their 2023 and 2024 season. But be that as it may, there are team needs here. It's really offensive line is one of the biggest needs here. Yes, they can use some help at wide receiver. It's something to look at as well. Defense, they're not as needy as a lot of other teams we talked about. Maybe defensive tackle could be a way that they could go. To be quite honest, I think that they're best suited here to go offensive line. I know, you want to make a case for wide receiver. Talk about Amika Ekuba, if
Igbuka.
Igubuga, but you can make a case for that for sure. But no, I think offensive line is something that desperately needs to be addressed here. I'm going to go Kelvin Banks, offensive tackle out of Texas. Again, if you don't have an offensive line to help out CJ Stroud, how good can CJ Stroud be? So I think you make a good step here at 25. You add an offensive tackle and, help out the trenches here because you haven't really done much of that of any kind of significance throughout this offseason. So that's the route I would go. Again, they do have needs at wide receiver. A lot of injuries happen, of course. Obviously, we're not expecting Tank Dell to play at all this year. Stephon Diggs is out. So yeah, there is a need there, but I personally think they're best suited to go offensive line here.
Yeah, and we are getting some messages here in the chat that the Vikings have Hargrave and Jonathan Allen. Yeah, I mean, I totally get that, and Allen signed for 3 or 60 million. It's not a ton guaranteed. Javon Hargrave, right? So they did beef up the trenches there at D
You're
tackle.
also talking about players that are long in the tooth there with
Right.
those
I
two.
think that's
It's not like they picked up a couple 26-year-olds. Yeah.
Yeah, that's part of the concern there too. I so and going to your Texans pick here with with Kelvin Banks again, a guy played out of Texas, right? Houston is in Texas, right? Like they
That it
probably
is, yes.
have a decent amount of information, I would think, on him.
Sure.
And so I think it would make sense to keep him there. And I'm not super high on him, so I'm glad he kind of fell here because I definitely like the offensive tackles that we took ahead of him. But let's take a move here to the next team, and that's going to be the Rams. A guy that sticks out like a sore thumb for me is going to be Jihad Campbell. They have a need at linebacker here. Jihad Campbell is the best linebacker in this class. Just really talented player. When you take a look at some of his when you look at some of his statistics, right? Grid run defender, right? Can cover as well, which is always something that's a plus when it comes to the linebacker position. 6'3", 244. He's young, a junior. And honestly, he can play in both schemes as in a 4-3, a 3-4, whether he's weak side linebacker or going to be on the even possibly on the edge. So he's a guy that can play a lot of different spots on the field. And I like Jahad Campbell, and I think this is a spot that the Rams need to address. Their defense has some issues, especially against the run, man. I mean, you look what Saquon Barkley did against them, and that is probably, I mean, defense and defending the run is their biggest need right now. So I would go with Jahad Campbell. I think that that makes a ton of sense. So that
Yeah.
would
Yeah.
that'd be my pick here.
Now, and I like that pick because also you look at what they did in last year's draft, and 3 out of their first 4 rounds, they took defense, and obviously, Verse being the biggest of the names to
Yeah.
get picked up. So yeah, I think they continue to in this retooling that they've done. Again, you mentioned earlier, people don't know what an actual like a soft rebuild, a retool, whatever you want to call it is. Well, the Rams are doing it. The Rams have done it, and they've been quite successful. I think they continue to do that by staying young defensively and keep picking up players in the first round, which if you are old enough to remember, there used to be a time in which the Rams never picked in the first round. So, but here they are. So, no, I like that pick. Can't argue with it. I'll take that defensively. It's probably going to burn my Niners quite a bit, but such is life. So, let's go on to we're getting to the nitty gritty. We're getting to the bottom of the line here. What the last 6 picks of the first round of the NFL draft. We'll go to the Baltimore Ravens. And Baltimore Ravens, they really didn't bring in, too many players. They brought in, if you want to say this is a thing, they brought in DeAndre Hopkins. So like, oh boy, okay. So we'll see how good he is at this point in his career. But really, offensive guard, cornerback, edge, those are the real positions of need. You can add to linebacker. So really, I think the biggest needs here are defensively, in my opinion. So if I'm going to go ahead and take a look at this, I mean, there are some players available. Benjamin Morrison out of Notre Dame, a cornerback. You could always go that route. You could always go with a Nick Scouton out of Texas A&M. I think defensively is the way to go here. I'm going to go with Jalen Walker. I don't think we've had him picked just yet. I'm going to go
Okay.
Jalen Walker, linebacker out of Georgia. Again, you could just as easily go after the 2 other positions that I mentioned, but I'll go Jalen Walker here at linebacker. A linebacker pick in the AFC North just kind of makes sense. But yeah, obviously, I mentioned this for the umpteenth time. Some teams need help, and they'll address it defensively via the draft. So I think this is the way the Baltimore Ravens go with Jalen Walker.
Yeah, I'm totally fine with that. I think Jalen Walker, again, a versatile guy, can definitely play on the edge. If you take a look here, he played on the D line 249 snaps. Also played in the box 311 times. A really talented player for the Georgia Bulldogs. And I think he could be a really good fit here, right? He can play both spots. This is also a team, that's, could that defense has been their strength, and now it's become a little bit of a weakness for them. They did lose their defensive coordinator, right? And so there's been some changes. And so that's why I think they took a little bit of a regression step back. But yeah, I think Jalen Walker is good there. I think the biggest thing that I'm noticing, it's tough, right? You do these sometimes, and some guys slip through the cracks, right? Nick Manwari, I'll go on record here. I don't think he slips out of the top 20. It's unfortunate that we haven't found a spot for him. But I just, with how he tested, I'll keep saying it. I just don't see a world where he falls. So I'm trying to find a team that I think makes a lot of sense. I mean, Buffalo would be a great spot for him. I mean, DeMar Hamlin's playing safety right now for them, and they have some holes there. So maybe that spot. I'm trying to think. I mean, I know the Lions have Branch. I don't know if that makes sense. It's crazy that they're saying wide receiver is the biggest need for the Lions. I'm confused there. But what are you gonna do?
Yeah, I don't have that as their biggest need on my end, but it is still listed as a need, and I think that's
Yeah.
appreciated. Yeah.
But I think Donovan Awuzaraki, this is a defense that we saw it right when
Aiden
why am I
Hutchinson.
Hayden Hutchinson went
Sorry.
down.
I got you.
No, you're good. I needed that. When Aiden Hutchinson went down, this defense had no pass rush. I mean, they lost a lot of guys, a lot of injuries.
They
But
did.
Donovan Aruzaraki, a really talented player out of Boston College. I think he's definitely going to go first round, probably towards the back. So I think this is a good spot for him. So I think that's a position of need for them, and I would definitely be comfortable pinning him there for the Detroit Lions.
Yeah, no, I like that pick quite a bit. You're right. I do think that it's going to be very, just to make that quick, just on a general standpoint, it's going to be fascinating to see what the Detroit Lions do. It's tough enough to lose one coordinator. Now you lose two of them, and you lose a lot of other coaches that coached alongside them. So, yeah, I think that's going to be very interesting. So we'll see where that goes. We'll go to the Washington Commanders here. Um, Listen, had a great year. You want to call it a Cinderella story? I guess you could, but made it all the way to the NFC Championship. Obviously, fell short against the Super Bowl champion Philadelphia Eagles. They brought in some players here, but I'll just say the Javon Kinlaw contract of 3 years, $45 million absolutely blows me away. I think that's the biggest overpay of the entire offseason, but again, they brought in some guys. They brought back some names. They've lost a few here. Nothing too substantial. Jonathan Allen, which they wanted to lose, that's fine. They already, they couldn't find any trade partners. So I'm actually going to go ahead. Pete, you'll probably be excited about this. Nick Emanuari, come on down. I think he is the pick here. There are needs defensively. Edge rusher is one of them, cornerback. But I do think this is a spot for them to go safety. Not a lot of needs offensively. They could just focus on the defense, hunker down. I've said so many teams are going to focus on defense. I feel like eventually, they're going to run out of players. But I'm going to go Nick Emanuari here as the pick here. So, Pete, I'm sorry. He doesn't go top 20, but he does go 29. But I think it's a nice pickup for Washington.
Yeah, I think it's actually good. I was taking a look at their safeties, and I mean it's nothing to write home for. I think Washington shored up their O line with the Landry Tunsil trade. That definitely would have been a possibility of them going tackle. Maybe they go Gray Zabel as a possibility at guard here if he sneaks his way into the first round. But I think Nick Emanuari is a good spot here. Especially with Dan Quinn, defensive-minded head coach. They could definitely use some juice back there. Washington is similar to Arizona, where last year they just played really hard with a lot of not so good pieces defensively. And same with Arizona. But we take a look here at the Buffalo Bills, and I think people want to say wide receiver. It's off the table, guys. Wide receiver. They drafted Keon Coleman last year. They brought in Josh Palmer. They have Khalil Shakir. I'm not in love with their core, but I think they're going to give, Keon Coleman the chance to develop.
Yeah.
That's what it is.
I'm just no, I'm just venting and not about what you're talking about. Just it seems like these AFC powerhouses, and I say the Chiefs, the Bills, the Ravens, we're always just waiting for them to pick up a top tier wide receiver. And I mean, outside of Stephon Diggs, when during his time with the Buffalo Bills, none of those teams have really done it in the last few years. Had that top notch wide receiver, that bona fide wide receiver. And I don't think it happens here either. But just venting.
No, I'm with you. I think cornerback is a big need. I think we saw in that game, they lost their starting cornerback, their best corner, who came in concussion protocol, got a concussion against the Chiefs. First, second series. We saw how thin they are. I talked about Trey Amos earlier. I really do like Trey Amos. I think he'd be a really good addition to this defense. For the most part, he's lined up on the outside as a boundary for most of his career in college, and had a good season, right? I mean, he gave up 2 touchdowns, 3 interceptions, a 54% passer rating, and I think he would fit in this defense that could definitely use some help in the secondary. I'll go Trey Amos out of Mississippi to the Bills.
Yeah, I don't mind that pick. Again, we talked about a couple teams that are doing these reboots, so to speak, or again, however you want to phrase it. And the Bills have done that, but one way in which it has not been completely figured out is at the cornerback position. So I do like that pick of Trey Amos. I think that helps out quite a bit. But yeah, I also it's wide receivers not a thing. So.
Yeah, I got. You're up here with the Chiefs, and I gotta say, I mean, it's got to be O line, right? I mean,
Yeah, you would think that that ought to be the case. So yeah, we should probably go offensive line here.
yeah,
Um, got to protect Pat Mahomes. Listen, we've noticed, there were a lot of other things that failed the Chiefs in last year's Super Bowl, but if you look at the Super Bowls in which the Chiefs have lost, it's the offensive line that's really failed them. I do think they go offensive line. It is a position of need, that being guard most specifically. So in this case, I'm going to go with Gray Zabel out of North Dakota State, offensive guard. And again, tackle needs to be addressed as well, but I think I'd go. You know what? I'm gonna pivot. Can I pivot? Am I allowed to pivot?
I don't know. Let me see.
We're
I
gonna
don't know
fucking
if I
pivot.
could switch that. I mean,
Well,
in
I'm doing it.
in theory, we'll say we'll pivot. I'm not posting this, so
I'm going with Josh Simmons. Let's go with Josh Simmons.
yeah, that's
Go
fair.
off tackle out of Ohio State. Let's go that way instead. If you can't pivot, too bad. It's okay. It's one of the last picks of the draft. But either way, you're unequivocally correct. They are going offensive line here. They need to. It needs to be addressed. And Chiefs are a smart organization. I'm sure they'll do the right thing.
I was gonna say there should be a way that I could do a trade, but I can't. I should be able to force a trade, but I don't know if I can
Well,
force a trade unless it's like that.
I
So
was I was destined to screw this up for you at some point. Just be happy it happened to pick 31 and not pick 11.
it's all
So yeah, take
right.
that. Yeah,
Well, the Philadelphia Eagles, I mean, at this point, their wide receiver hilariously being their one of their biggest needs. I mean, sure, wide receiver
yeah,
3.
yeah.
I mean,
Right.
just
yeah,
a
Ex-
hilarious amount of riches here.
yeah.
I mean,
Glaring need. Glaring need.
and honestly, this is again like we talk about what's gone on in this draft, like Walter Nolan not in the first round. Like I can understand the wide receivers. I think that's very possible. So I'm just going to take best player available, Walter Nolan. I'm not saying it's necessarily their biggest need. They have a ton of defenders, but this is a defense and this is just a team that's continuous to build on and double down on strength and take best player available. So I don't think it's the best fit necessarily based on what the team quote unquote needs. They just lost Milton Williams, so maybe you could argue edge, but yeah, I mean, I'm gonna go Walter Nolan just because he's the best player there on the board, and
Well,
yeah, that's the pick.
you've seen some of the offseason moves that the Eagles have done this year, and a couple of them have been classified as being depth moves. Because again,
Right.
it's like you referenced at the top of talking about the Eagles. It's an embarrassment of riches. They got a lot going on. They're doing very well for themselves. So yeah, it's gonna be, a lot of times when you're a team picking at 32, you're not really desperate. You're not really dying for a particular position. So sometimes, yeah, it is adding depth. So yeah,
Yeah.
I don't
Yeah.
hate it.
Um, Blake comes in said, if it is Josh, I'm just worried about his injured knee. Yeah. He's extremely talented. I think they'll be smart enough to check out the medicals with Josh Simmons to the Chiefs. The Chiefs are in a tough spot, man. I obviously being a Broncos fan, it might sound biased, but I just think that they really were going to try to make a push for what's his name from the Ravens, Ronnie
Staley.
Staley.
Yep.
And I think when Staley didn't hit the open market, th- I mean, it didn't work out. And I think Joe Tooney, they were maybe banking that Joe Tooney would be comfortable playing tackle, and he did step up and play well, but I don't think he wanted to play that position. It's not his natural role. And, they did a lot of pivoted, and that's why they tagged Trey Smith because, they didn't want to risk losing him. And,
Yep.
they end up trading. I mean, it's just such a weird offseason for the Chiefs. I don't think they're doing a rebuild, but I think it's again, we see these really good teams that people think that they're tearing shit down when it's like it's a semi-ish rebuild. It's not the Chiefs aren't rebuilding, but I think they're
Yeah.
retooling, right? They're making some changes, and yeah,
Which
I just
which again, that's You referenced it earlier. That's what smart organizations do. There's bad organizations just ride till the wheels fall off and get
Yeah.
nothing out of it, and then they got to rebuild everything. So yeah,
Yeah, so we'll see, but here's pretty much the board here. I'm not going to read it all off. I'm tired. We're at
why
the
not?
hour 30 mark. You want to read it?
No, I'm busting your balls. It's fine. You don't have to read it. You're good.
But the board's here, right? I mean, again, I think when we take a look, I think the biggest shockers are for me is Nick Emanwari falling to 29, Walter Nolan being there at 32. A lot of talent ended up falling down that way. Um, Outside of that, I mean, I think Malachi Starks. I think this is a fair spot for him. I think he likely goes there. I think Amon Wari is very possible to go here. Between one of these teams. I mean, I know the Colts brought in a safety, but I could very much see them bringing him in still. And again, the Falcons are going defense no matter what. I mean, they had a chance. They could take any defender off the board last year and didn't, and their defense was fucking terrible under
Yep.
Ricky Morris, who's a defensive coach.
Let's coach. Right. And by
So
the way, their defense a year prior, not terrible.
no. So yeah, weird.
What's that all that?
So yeah, I mean, it's just kind of weird how the board falls because like I don't really hate any of the guys that were selected. I just think that somehow there's no way Walter falls that far. I don't think Nick falls that far. Kelvin Banks maybe goes a little bit higher. Kenneth Grant probably goes a little bit higher. Siobhan Ravel might go somewhere a little bit lower down here. But all in all, I mean, there's so much. I mean, even this, like the last draft me and Matt did a few weeks ago, so much changed, right? The combine happened in between.
Sure.
Well, no, this was actually we did it post combine. We did it the day after the combine. But there's so much that changes, right? I mean, now people are having Matthew Golden is the number one receiver, right? Like I didn't have the Cowboys taking receiver last time we did this, right? I didn't have the 49ers taking edge. I had them taking O lineman, right? So we'll see. All in all,
O lineman's very realistic for the Niners too. I just think
yes,
either way, they're focusing on trenches.
yeah.
Especially even though I know the names haven't been blockbuster, but they brought in some cornerbacks. The trenches are where the Niners are going to go at 11, whether it's offense or defense.
Yeah, a lot of teams are going to. I mean, dude, this is such a deep class.
Sure.
Especially on the interior. It's a decent amount of solid edges too. But I mean, that's really gonna do it for us guys. I do want to shout some people out. I mean, I know Blake is here. Appreciate you jumping in, man. I think it's been a little bit since we saw you. I recognize the name from a couple months back, I believe. If not, and you are a new a new viewer, feel free to subscribe. Zach Linton, as always, in the chat. We do appreciate you, man. Michael, ATL, appreciate you. Mike Larry, thanks for
He
jumping
jumped
in.
in there. Look at that.
Yeah, Kevin Gibson, appreciate you. And as always, Albert is always here on time as soon as we start on the dot. So I appreciate you guys very much for tuning in. We're going to continue, guys. We have a lot more coming up. We're coming out of the dry season of content, right? So there is more on the way. We have some exciting stuff we're ready to roll out soon. So, definitely keep your eye out for that. And that's going to do it for us, guys. Appreciate you all watching. And we will see you guys next time.